Hey guys, this is Ehren.Bienert. Starting a YouTube channel here with some tutorial videos on it. Thought would help some people out. As promised, I wanted to start with a print preparation video. It's something that a lot of people, there's a lot of confusion about because there are a ton of different ways to skin a cat, as they say, and there are a lot of different approaches to print preparation, and I will show you what I know works. And I have used three different printers, and this was kind of like a lot of trial and error went into this. Um, but I've got it streamlined at this point, and I run a Stratasys Eden 260V at ARH Studios, which is a like $80,000 piece of equipment, and I run this thing every single day, and the techniques, the pipeline that I'm going to show you for this works just fine, and it worked on my little um, Airwolf filament printer too. It worked on a MakerBot, and it worked on an older 260, or I'm sorry, excuse me, an older Eden that I had some experience with at McFarlane, and I believe I even ran some files on a Projet at McFarlane as well. But anyway, without further ado, just going to break this down real quick. This is just a random sculpt that I've been working on that it's not even ready to print, but it really doesn't matter because I can just do some quick stuff to it to show you how to approach this. Um, and it'll give you an idea of like the basic pipeline for 3D printing. First of all, okay, ZBrush is the primary software we use, but you're also going to need Netfabb. And what I've got here is Netfabb Basic 6.4. To get it, it's super simple. You just hop on the internet, go to the netfabb.com site, that's Netfabb. Go to the go to download, and you'll see the Netfabb basic link. So, sorry, my internet's a little bit slow. Just download the Netfabb basic software that is appropriate for your operating system, Windows 7, 8, or 10, I'm assuming for most of you, and install it. That's it. There's nothing to it. They don't even require a licensing key, and everything that you need to do your final print prep work is in this program. And in fact, most of the parts that we're going to be sending through here directly out of ZBrush are only going to be in Netfabb for 5 minutes. Seriously, it's so simple. You'll be blown away when you see how easy this is. Most of the print prep work and the keying happens in ZBrush utilizing dynamesh and booleans. And the method that I've got here, maybe some people would call it crude. I know a lot of guys still use magics for their own reasons. They use it at McFarlane, where I came from, and I didn't feel like dropping, what is it, 4 or 5 grand on a program to cut up and process a sculpt. So I taught myself how to use Netfabb, and guess what? It works fine in conjunction with all this stuff in ZBrush. So without further ado, let's get started. Basically, what I've got here is a leg for a sculpt. I'm going to clone it so I have it on its own palette here, or whatever you call it. I don't know. In a lot of ways, I'm still a ZBrush noob. Man, some of these guys know ZBrush inside out and backwards. I use ZBrush in a very utilitarian sense. I don't do a bunch of fancy tricks and stuff. I'm just like sculpt and get it out of ZBrush. Done. So anyway, if I use like incorrect terminology with inside ZBrush, forgive me, but I will point things out to the best of my ability to have this make sense for everybody. Anyway, cloned subtool here. I'm just gonna hole fill this. We're gonna make our cut, and I'll show you. Modify topology, close holes. I just wanted this closed for simplicity. But the part I'm going to cut is right through here. Let's get rid of this poly paint stuff so you can see it. The part I'm going to cut is right through here where her what's that thing called? Her drawing a blank. The her stocking comes up to her thigh. Jeez. Anyway, yeah, we're gonna cut this thing right where her stocking is, and I'm not even 100% certain that that's where I'm gonna cut it for the final part. But for the sake of a quick tutorial, let's just do this. So what I need to do initially is split these two parts so that we have her thigh here and her lower leg on the other side, and we're going to use this the stocking as the parting line, and that has to do with factory production work as well, because when you cut the piece up for production, you want all the seams to be hidden in places where it makes sense. Like you could cut it right through here if you had to, but why do it there when you can hide the seam along, a spot where, like, if you've got the two parts coming together, it'll just make sense to have the parting line there. So that's what we're going to do. So basically, we're just gonna, let's look at our mesh. That was the other thing I wanted to consider. I don't have any fancy meshes. This is just dynameshed to hell. No like concern for like really nice quads or like layout of geometry. It's just dynamesh junk. So don't worry about your mesh. Obviously, you need to pay attention to where your computer's ability to keep up with what you're doing. But for the sake of this, like you can see, I've got some detail and then knee here with some drapery, and this edge is a little bit rough, but you could subdivide it again and it wouldn't matter. Anyway, for the sake of this tutorial, let's just cut this thing. I'm gonna select a mask curve brush here and just make as accurate a cut as I can along this line here. And again, there might be a better way to do this, but for the sake of a fast tutorial, this is how I'm doing it. So just mask the area that you want to cut. And you do need to be careful. You gotta cut it as accurately as you can. Otherwise, you're not going to be happy with the final results. And you can see where I've got a little bit of I missed with my mask here. I'm using a tiny little Wacom tablet. I do have a Cintiq that I use normally at work, which I'll talk about later. I don't think they're really necessary, but I am not used to using this tiny little Wacom tablet. It's so small. Anyway, but it gets the job done. I could probably clean this up a little bit more, but it's still a relatively low resolution mesh, so I'm not going to be able to get it super perfectly accurate. But that's as good as we need it for a tutorial. So now that the side is masked, the one side is masked, we can go to our subtool menu, go to the split submenu, and go to split to unmask points. So now you've got two subtools up here. Now what we want to do is simply close holes. So geometry, close holes. And you want to close holes on both of the subtools. Bam. Okay? So now you've got both sides hole filled. And again, the geometry is like, it doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. You've got different poly groups, which we'll address later. It doesn't really factor into what we're doing here. But anyway, that's what it looks like, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is where things start to get a little bit more tricky, but for a person that's been using ZBrush for even a month, you're going to understand how this works. What we need to do is create a key. so that when the factory or whoever you print it out, or you want to make molds, you've got a way. Sorry about that. I'm using a Microsoft encoder that only allows me 10-minute video sections at a time. So the videos might be like broken up a little bit. But anyway, what I was saying is we need to put keys in this thing so that after you print it, it goes back together perfectly where you want it. So usually what I do is I append a cube to the scene, um, and this will be the basis for our key. Super simple. Select your cube, go to your deformation palette, and taper it a little bit. Oh my god, my tablet is being an idiot. Just taper it a little bit so that this is going to act as the peg. This is the male part of the peg, and the female part is going to be in the other. And without being too sexually suggestive, you need one part to slide into the other as easily as possible, and the taper is going to allow that to happen. So we need to we need to scale this down so that we can see. Yeah, so the leg was hidden in there. We need to scale the cube down. So just grab your transpose scale line there and scale it down. Kind of arbitrary. However, it's like depending on how big the piece is, you'll understand when I place it on here. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to say I want the male peg to be on the lower part of the leg. So let's move it into position. God, I really suck with this tablet. It's irritating me so much. So you want it to be, you want like this surface here and this surface here to be as parallel as possible. So make sure perspective is off and just line these bad boys up. I am really fumbling around with this, I'm sorry. So scale it down a little bit so that it's not too huge. That's probably a little bit bigger than necessary. That's probably right where we want it to be. So move it down into the leg so that you've got enough showing that it's going to give you some meat. Like it's definitely going to have a nice positive lock when it slides into the other part. But you don't want the key to be so big that it is like interfering with the edges out here. Like these clearances are important. You don't want it like so huge. Here, I'll show you. Like you don't want it so big that the corners are like trying to poke through over here. You got to pay attention to that. But this right here is a perfectly acceptable size for the surface that we're the two mating surfaces. So like I said, just try to like center it, line it up, get it as parallel as you can within reason. It's not like an exact science. And I'm gonna say that's about good. I'm gonna make this thing just a little bit bigger. Whoops. I'm not a complete novice. Anyway, that's it. So for that step. So now we have this key in place. You can see it's not like poking through anywhere weird, right? Okay. Now here is where like having a relatively simple mesh and a good computer can come in handy. There are a couple ways of approaching this next step, and I may go into different ways in the future, but just again for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to show you the easiest way to do this. What I'm going to do is merge these two subtools, the lower part of the leg and this male key. That's it. Okay, they're merged. They have different polygroups. Again, just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to merge these polygroups. Group visible under your polygroups menu. And then I'm going to dynamesh it. And I'm not a dynamesh expert. I'm like a kind of a spray and pray dude here with this. So I'm going to just try it at like 184 and see what happens. Okay, that's way too low. What I try to do is when I dynamesh and I'm happy with the detail on it, I try, like, it's dynameshed initially, and I check out my active points up here. So it's like 251. So when I dynamesh it, I want to see like a relatively similar active point number. So I'm going to bump it up to 440 and see what happens. Still way too low. I'm going to go up to 1800. Now it's like fighting me a little bit, it's thinking. But that got me pretty good results. All my details still there. No like weird edges or anything, and my key is there and it's polygrouped good. Now we're going to go back to the upper part of the leg, the thigh here, and I'm going to dynamesh that as well to get rid of this weird jumbled tessellated mesh up here where I hole filled it. That's pretty important. You want to do that, otherwise it could do weird things like delete surfaces or something. I don't know. Just dynamesh it. When you have this crappy tessellated junk here, just dynamesh it for your own sanity. Trust me. And again, I'm gonna have to play with this. I'm gonna bump it up to like 1,000, see what happens. So right now it's at active. The active points are at 116,000. I'm gonna bump it up to like 1,600. Good. All right. All the details there. It's at 153. So now this is where we're gonna take another step, and things get a little bit more complicated. I'm just gonna pause it here briefly. Okay. This is where we actually go about using the Boolean operation in ZBrush to subtract the male part from the female part, and then that will create our key. So the first thing we need to do is merge these two pieces, and we need to pay attention to these Boolean functions in the subtool palette right here. So what you want to do is select these two little intersecting circles. You need to select this one and this one. And for the sake of simplicity, we're only going to Boolean, dynamesh Boolean, two parts here. So once these two semicircles, intersecting circles, are selected, what we want to do is merge them. But the first thing we want to do is make sure that the part that we want subtracted from is on top before we merge. So we're going to merge down, but I want this part here, the thigh, the upper part of the thigh, to remain. So whatever part you want to remain after the Boolean operation is complete, that part goes on top. And that takes some getting used to. You got to run through that a couple times. If maybe you're an idiot like me, it took me like 8 times to figure that out, that the part that you want to remain is the part that stays on top. But first, you need to clone this, because once the Boolean operation is complete, the lower part of this leg that we used to Boolean out of the upper part of this leg is going to disappear. It'll be gone. So don't forget to either clone it or duplicate it. I cloned it. Whatever. Duplicating it, it'll do the same. In fact, I'll show you. Just going to duplicate it and hide the extra one. But now we've got these two parts here. We're ready to do the Boolean operation. We've got our semicircles, the second semicircle in from the left selected on both parts. The upper part of the thigh, the part that we want remaining, is on top. That's it. Okay, so select that part and merge down. Bam. It's one part now, and that's it. So now your male key is hidden inside those two parts. The other subtool is hidden, and we want to make sure that those two little semicircles, the second one in from the left, is still selected. Go down to your geometry menu, and we're going to dynamesh again. Okay, and I usually leave the dynamesh where I left it on the previous dynamesh. That seems to be a pretty accurate way of keeping your detail where you want it without like going crazy, like waiting for the computer to process the whole thing all over again. So let's do it. Dynamesh. It's going to think a little bit, but it should work. Look at that. There is now a female hole in that leg. So here's the magic of this, is that it's a nice keyed fit that perfectly relates to the male part on the other side. So remember we duplicated that subtool? Well, now it's, let me hide this. So you've got a perfectly keyed part, and I'm just going to use you've got two perfectly keyed parts. I'm just going to use the move tool. I'll make this other part visible. I'm sorry, I'm still fumbling with this stupid tiny Wacom tablet. But here, so wow, look at that, amazing. And guess what? We didn't use magics. Screw that program. But that's it. So for ZBrush, that is the keying operation that I use for every single part that I make at ARH Studios. All the professional keying work that I do is done exactly like that. It does get a little bit more complicated when you're dealing with more subtools. Like if her shoe was still on there, I'd have to, basically merge that on there before I went into the processing part of this. But I'll show you, I'll break that down in another video. So anyway, keying is done. The next step is to export these out of ZBrush as STLs. So I'll do that right now. Let me pause this.